Anybody, anywhere,
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen.
This pass caught by Paulsen, the tight end.
And from 106.7 The Fan, Grant Paulsen.
Welcome into Take Command. You can watch us on the 106.7 The Fan and Team 980 YouTube channels. Of course, you can get the audio of this podcast wherever you get your pod. Subscribe, rate, review, pass along that we're going to be doing this multiple times a week throughout the offseason. We're going to be giving you draft player breakdowns, free agency previews, position by position breakdowns of every spot on the team here to kick off the offseason. So there's going to be plenty of content coming into your feeds as Commanders fans that you're going to want. I'm Grant Paulsen, joined as always by Logan Paulsen, who spent a decade in the NFL. Logan, what's good? We made it. We got through the season, man. It's over.
Yeah, we got through the season. Now, like I was talking to someone today, it's like, oh, you must get some time off. It's like I feel like I'm watching more film than I've ever watched before because Shrine Bowl's right around the corner, Senior Bowl's around the corner. So I got to get about 100 guys done before the Shrine Bowl and then hopefully get another 50 done before. So, yeah, got a lot of work. A lot of work yet ahead.
And so does the team as they put together their draft boards, their free agency plans. Before we get into breaking down the Eagles game and just some like final thoughts on what we saw toward the end of the season from some of the players on the field, the big topic right now that I think people would probably want insight on, and especially your analysis as a tape viewer and as a longtime cerebral offensive mind in this league, is Kliff Kingsbury. There's this rumor that turned into a report that comes out about his relationship with Adam Peters and now his future's in question with the team. Yesterday in his press conference, Dan Quinn had an opportunity to kind of endorse him. I didn't think he did that. So I just wanted to dive into this with you and ask, this year, they ranked 12th in offense, despite not having Jaden Daniels for the majority of the season, despite second and third string quarterbacks playing for the most part, and quite literally missing more man games than any other offense in the league. How do you view the season for Kingsbury this year?
Yeah, what's funny is I think when you're looking at the team, right, you kind of say, like, what are the areas that really need to be addressed? Obviously, like the defensive side of the football, defensive line, maybe wide receiver depth. Like, there's stuff that pops up. But in terms of the way Kliff handled this season, I'm not sure that I have a lot of notes, right? I think, like, when you say, like, you took a group of guys, like, you mentioned the man hours missed, like with Terry being out, with Noah Brown being out, Deebo banged up at multiple points this season. Back half of the season, you don't have Zach, who's like your best third down weapon. The offensive line's kind of in constant flux. You don't have your starting quarterback. And for him to make that thing kind of work, being piecemealed and held together with duct tape, I think is a huge testament to him. Now, there's some things that I think, like if I was in Kliff's shoes, I would look at it and be like, what could I be doing better? And there's a couple things that I would kind of maybe point to, but overall, I think I leave the season being relatively positive about Kliff and his approach and what he was able to do with the players he had available, quite honestly.
Yeah, and over a 2-year sample now, you're talking about a pretty elite offensive output in year one last year, where Daniels played like an MVP and had a historical season, and you get to the NFC title game. And then whatever we view this year as, where they finished 12th in yards per play, top 5 as a rushing unit, 12th as a passing unit. They did some other pretty good things, by the way. They were, I don't know if people know this, but they were like, 9th on 4th down. They were top 5 in the red zone this year. They were 8th in goal to go. So there were some areas offensively, despite a lot of key players being out, where they actually thrived statistically.
I think that's exactly right. And it is, when you look at all of the kind of aggregate data around the offense, you say to yourself, like, that's not a bad group, And again, like, given the context, like, and I'm not trying to give him an excuse, like, given the context, I think there's a lot of positive things to glean. Now, that being said, like, there are some things that I would say, like, if Kliff were to ask me, which he would never do, but if he were to ask me, like, what are some areas that we need to work on? I would say, like, what's our protection plan versus all out? What's our protection plan versus some of this line movement, edge pressure that we got versus the Dallas Cowboys in the first matchup? Green Bay, like, how do we handle, again, some of these twists, cross-dog stuffs on the interior? But that's, every offense is going to have things that need to be looked at and need to be addressed. And so, yeah, that's one thing I would look at. I'm sure other people, fans, I can hear them already in the comments talking about running the football more. I think there are times where you do need to run the football more, again, to kind of play complementary football, limit some of the load on a defense that's struggling in terms of possessing the ball. But that being said, I also think like that running the football to possess the football to me is somewhat of a that's like an old way of thinking. Like you possess the football to run the football. So if I was going to talk to Kliff and say, hey, I'd say like, what can we do to be a little bit more efficient on third down, right? So like, that's kind of the way I look at it. It's like third down efficiency, pass protection plan. And I guess if you want to be hypercritical, you say, how do we protect Jaden Daniels more? I think that falls more on Jaden Daniels at this point than it does on Kliff. But those are the kind of the three things I'd look at and say, areas of improvement for the offseason, sure. But like to the main point of this conversation, like I do think there's a lot of things you look at and you say, man, like look at the offensive production with backup quarterbacks, with banged up backup wide receivers. Treylon Burks off the street has all of a sudden become a piece that people are really excited about. I give Kliff a lot of credit for that. Obviously, Treylon Burks deserves credit too, but I think that's kind of the environment we're looking at where you're like to find, like you can specifically criticize some things, but overall, I think the picture for the offense is pretty good.
Yeah, it's above the threshold to me of like we're talking about him being out. Like I that would surprise me. And based on performance, I would say it's not worth replacing him and moving on when he's got a year left on his contract or firing a guy. I think he has done a better job than that. Having said that, I want to double click on a couple things you just said. The first is the protection plan stuff. Like the one that I noticed that most watching back was the Minnesota game. It felt like they didn't really have answers. They ended up getting shut out 31-0. So like, take me into that. Do you remember that as a player at all? Or like, how does that happen where are you just surprised by something they do? Like, and so you didn't plan for it to have that answer? Or is it maybe just, some people have strengths and weaknesses. Is it a weakness maybe of this offense or this coordinator? Like, how did that happen in those couple of games? And do you think that's part of the frustration maybe?
I'm sure it's part of the frustration. So with Minnesota, I think it's a really good example. Like when you're in a lot of 11 personnel, like you're in a lot of 6-man pro, 5 and 6-man pros. And when you're dealing with all out, you need to have really specific plans and solutions. And so it's not like that they didn't have a plan. I think that's like a misnomer when we start talking like this. They obviously had something that they thought would work. It was going to be like, we're going to run a lot of quick game. We're going to run a lot of screens. We're going to hit a lot of these kind of speed timing outs, and that's going to work. But like when you look at Minnesota, like they're built from a coverage standpoint to kind of stop that stuff. So like I've been a part of game plans like with Kyle, Sean, like super smart dudes where you go and you say like, this is what we're going to do. And you go and like the first time you run the play, you're like, oh, like that's not going to work. And so then all of a sudden you've invested all this man hours, all this time, all this install on these sequences of plays that from the first play, from the jump is just out. And so I think like, with the gun protection stuff, like you really got to be comprehensive. You really got to think and find solutions. You have to coach the offensive line, in my opinion, to pass that a little different way, especially versus all these all-out looks to give the quarterback, an extra 1/10 of a second to get the ball out. So I'd say they did have a plan. I don't think it hit the way they thought it was going to hit. And I think it's, to me, when I say protection plan, it's more like we know they're going to run a cross dog. So let's have the center set the cross dog in a certain way. Let's have him drag set this as opposed to jump set, or like offensive lineman on the perimeter. I understand like with the jump sets, you want to create width and space in the pocket, but with a team that's bringing all this stunting and motioning, sometimes a vertical set's a little bit more effective. So again, these are stylistic things that I'd have conversations about. And again, maybe there's reasons why they chose not to do that, which I totally understand. But I do think like that's something when you're in the gun as much as they are, especially on first and second down, and it's not the gun, it's just when you're in 11 on first and second down as much as they are in a spread out formation, the solutions to handle zero and zero derivatives, the way that Minnesota runs them, the menu just becomes a little bit shorter. And that's why I think you see a lot of teams run the football against Minnesota, really try to get downhill, get in tight formations, play action shots, because it does mitigate some of that stuff. And again, Kliff has his own solutions, right? Which I think, again, we've talked about a little bit here, but that's kind of what I'm saying. Long story short is the plan in 11 and gun stuff can just be a little bit more challenging at times. And so can you figure it out? Absolutely. And I think that's something they can work on this offseason.
Logan Paulsen, Grant Paulsen take command. Another question I've had in terms of maybe philosophically why there might be some butting of heads or just a tweak that maybe a Dan Quinn and Adam Peters or somebody would want to see do you think the stuff that, we've harped on a lot as a show, and I say that as myself mostly, but any of the amount of time they're in shotgun, the lack of under center, like any of that's an issue? Or do you think it's more, either protection plan, run pass, protecting Jaden, some of the other stuff we're talking about?
I think it's more like, I think about like Oregon when Marcus Mariota was there. Like they were in the gun a lot, pistol gun, offset gun, whatever you want to call it. And they were really effective, and they were a run-first team. And Kliff, I would say, in Arizona was a run-first coordinator. I mean, they were above 50% in some, like one season he was there, like 48% in terms of calling runs. So you can do this kind of exotic smash mouth thing from the gun. And again, the under center element is something that I think needs to be talked about, but I don't think it's the end all be all. I think that's the thing, is like when you're in the gun, you have other things, other tools at your disposal. You have the RPO, you have the zone read, you have different backfield actions and sets. Like you can do a little bit more of that, like kind of pop pass, kind of jet sweep stuff that we've seen here and we've seen like Kansas City do. So it's just about understanding the tools you have available given the offensive set you choose to be in. Like, do I think that that is an issue? It'd be hard for me to say that because I don't know. I'm not in the room. And also, we talked about at the top of the show how effective the offense has been. So maybe there's a philosophical clashing somewhere in there about, hey, we need to, run the football more, or I'm more familiar. One of the people on the staff is more familiar with kind of this West Coast Kyle Shanahan tree, right? And we need to be in more of that stuff. And so there is it a potential? Yeah, but I don't know for sure. And again, based on what Kliff has done this year, it's hard for me to say that is the reason that they should move on from him, because the offense, despite all this adversity, has been very productive.
Also, looking at the numbers at the end of the year, if what I've got in front of me is correct, on 1st and 10, they ran it at basically like a 60-40 clip, which is a lot higher than I would have anticipated. And frankly, I think it's higher than is generally healthy. Like that's not even where I want to be. So a lot of times when you're looking at run pass balance, people look at the overall runs and passes in a game, or they'll look at the overall runs or passes in a season. And I think that's misleading because you've got 2 minute, you got 4 minute, you've got, a lot of other situational things that dictate that you have to do one or the other. End of game, you're running if you have the lead, you're throwing if you're behind. You're looking at early down run pass rate, especially when the game is close. And I would say that just quickly looking at this right now on 1st and 10, 2nd and 5, those types of things, the run downs, they did run at a pretty high percentage. So just throwing that out there too.
No, I think that's right. And I think that's good context to provide to our listeners, is not the total run volume doesn't always coincide with like when they're actually running the football. And sometimes like these teams that have really high first down, like I mentioned the third down thing, like this is the fun thing about football, right? Is everyone says, oh, you need to be better on third down. But like, what if our first down run efficiency is not that great? And so all of a sudden we're in a lot of 2nd and 10s because we're kind of chronically running the football on first down. We're setting ourselves up to be in a bad situation on third down. And if you look at last year, like Jaden Daniels was able to overcome a lot of that because he's able to scramble, he's able to maximize 2nd and long, get you to 3rd and short more often than not. You have this really high 4th down conversion percentage. So I don't know, like it's an interesting kind of conversation to have regarding Kliff, because I do think a lot of the things that people levy criticism against him for, like he does run the football, he does run the ball on first down. Like there are these isolated moments that you remember, like the Minnesota game where there's 3 passes. Then you look at the Philly game and he runs the ball into a brick wall basically 8 times in that game, and then they hit a play action pass for a touchdown, and they had a scramble for a touchdown off of a play action pass. So it's just, I think you have these moments that are kind of seared into your mind. But I think when you look at the seasonal data, I think it supports a pretty well-rounded, pretty well thought out offensive scheme that, again, does it have shortcomings? Sure, but every offensive system has shortcomings. Like I remember when I was with Kyle and with Sean, like they have this great first down run play action pass package, and it's really dynamic. But then all of a sudden when they got in the red zone, this is when I was here in 2010 and 2011. I think I brought this up the last time we were on the show. Like that was one of the more efficient offenses in the NFL. Like we were ranked 3rd in total yardage for the season, right? But we were like 26th or 30th in red zone efficiency because again, like the offense changes. You lose all of the dynamic elements of like this run on first down, play action shot element of your offense. And so I think like every offense has its warts, every offense has its wrinkles. And the thing about offense and the thing about the NFL is you got a bunch of really smart dudes in a room in the offseason, they're able to make it right. So that's what I'd kind of point to here is I do think like there issues, sure, but are they correctable? Absolutely. And if as long as you've got coaches on staff with a student mindset, I think they're going to be fine. So it is an interesting conversation at this point of the year to be having about Kliff, because overall, I think it's a net positive. But again, like I'm not in the building, so I don't know. I'm not privy to all the information, basically.
3 teams ran the ball more on 1st and 10. Nobody threw the ball less on 1st and 10 than Washington. And if you're wondering about the scrambles, if that skews it, those are separated from the numbers I'm giving you. They had 16 1st and 10 scrambles this year, which was 4th most in the NFL. He's Logan Paulsen. I'm Grant Paulsen. This is Take Command. Let's take a quick look back at the Eagles game. There are a couple of guys I wanted to hit on and some things I wanted to ask you about. One final look back at a football game before we're on to the offseason. Next on Take Command. Welcome back, Take Command. Logan Paulsen and Grant Paulsen on the heels of a win, 24-17. Washington beat the Eagles on Sunday to end their season. 39-year-old journeyman Josh Johnson gets a second victory as a quarterback in this organization, once as a Redskin under Jay Gruden and now as a Commander under Dan Quinn. Some things to talk about here. First, the 2000th tackle for Bobby Wagner in his career. Credit to you, you were on this because you started talking about this a month ago, and it became very obvious to me. For whatever reason, and I think it's just how much everyone respects him in the building, this was a huge priority for them. Like they really wanted this to happen. And I kept asking, like, why are we not sitting him and playing Jordan McGee? And here's why. I mean, they really wanted him to get this number. It meant a lot to him. And he got it right on the nose. Like he needed 5 tackles. He ended up with 5 tackles. So maybe he doesn't get there if he sits for a possession. And I can have the debate or whether or not that should have been the priority or whatever. But it meant a lot to the team. It meant a lot to the people in the locker room as they kind of dogpiled him after the game and presented him with the game ball. And he got his 2000th tackle. 3rd player to ever do it, pretty amazingly. Ray Lewis, London Fletcher, Bobby Wagner.
Yeah, I mean, it's we've talked about this a lot on the Command Center stuff. We talked about it post-game quite a bit. And I'm going to say the same thing I said there because it is an amazing feat. Like, I can't think of a feat in the NFL that is more physically, emotionally demanding than 2,000 tackles. Because not only do you have to be in the NFL for a very long time, but like you are in basically 2,000 car crashes over the course of a 13 or 14-year career. And the amount of body toll that has to take and the amount of time you have to spend to keep yourself right, like, it's an incredible accomplishment. Like, quite honestly, like Grant, I can't think of an achievement that's more like physically demanding. You know, maybe if you're like a 1,500-yard rusher or something, I can't even think of something. But it is a crazy statistic to be going out there and putting your body on the line like that, and then getting it done 2,000 times. You know, is really a testament to him. And so, you know, like you were talking about Bobby and whether he should sit and all that stuff. I actually thought since the Miami week, he's been playing really, really good football and has deserved to be on the field as much as he's been on the field. Obviously, the conversation prior to that, I think, is justified. But really just a fantastic moment. And it's awesome that Fletch was able to be down there in the locker room with him. And like, what a unique environment to be in. Like that you've got a future Hall of Famer in London Fletcher in the room with a guy who just had 2,000 tackles, who's going to be in the Hall of Fame at some point. It really is a very special moment to get that done in the last game against Philly. Yeah,
it was really cool to see. Jeremy Reaves, I wanted to give him some flowers. He had an interception at the goal line. He had a really nice PBU that was kind of teach tape, timing, pass breakup without PI in the game as well. Really worth pointing out to me because this is a guy for his entire career pretty much that initially was not a 53 guy. You know, this is a player that's not going to make the team. Then he's a practice squad guy. Then he's he's on the 53, but he's going to play some special teams. Then he's a special teams all-pro. Like, this is what they say, talk about the American dream. This is like the NFL dream. You know what I mean? Where you keep getting a little better. You keep getting a little better. Next thing you know, this year, he's played a ton at safety on defense for the first time this many years in, this many coaching staffs in. And he's really come into his own to be an asset for them. How physical he is, how violent he is. I think when you talk about like who plays the way you want them to play, it's him. Now, he's not a guy necessarily that I'm signing up to have start 17 games next year. You know, you're looking for players that can be hugely impactful, and if he can plug and play like a Caleb Downs or something in the top 10, that's going to be more exciting. But I can also say, I think both are true. Like, damn if I don't love watching Jeremy Reaves play football, man. And like, if I don't root for that dude, like, this is the whole point. And I just, watching him fly around in week 18, as cynical as you want to be, sitting on the couch saying this game doesn't matter. If they lose, it's better for the draft. Like, that's a guy that is laying it all on the line. And just one of the easiest players to root for I can ever remember covering.
Dude, the NFL dream is a perfect way to describe it. I mean, like, every time you see a guy, like, think about it. Every time you see a kid drafted in the late round or a UDFA that makes a team, and you're like, oh, dude, you know, if he does this, and this, he could be a really good player. And every year, you know, there's hundreds, thousands over the course of my career of guys watching that never quite figure it out. And there's always that one guy that, like, makes it happen. And Jeremy Reaves, I think, has done a great job of clawing, scratching, fighting, getting a role on the team, finding a way to stick on teams, being an absolute stud there. And then think about even this year. Like, I think his first start was against Atlanta. There was a little bit of miscommunication issues. He missed a couple tackles. And then the great thing about him, and really the highest compliment I can pay any football player, is he got better every single week. And to see his season culminate with this Philadelphia game where he's running downhill, tackling violently, making PBUs on the football, like, that's a club, Grant, that I didn't think he had in his bag. The ability to have pass breakups and intercept the football. Like, talking about the interception, they're in cover 3. I'll be damned if in that moment I was like, this is quarters. Like, what is Tanner McKee doing with that football? They're in cover 3. He plays the quarterback's eyes. He gets right in the throwing window and just makes a fantastic play. And so, great job for him. Like, kudos to him. It's just talk about just a feel-good story for the season, in a season that's been kind of mucky and gross. Like, dude, Jeremy Reaves, 100%, really excited. And again, like, he earned this in terms of getting better every time he had an opportunity to.
Second interception of his career. You know, that felt good. Another guy on defense that I thought really stood out against the Eagles and finished his season strong, and he had a good year, was Daron Payne. Like, he's just legit good. We know that. He's been to a Pro Bowl. He's paid very handsomely. He's the highest paid player on the team going into next year. I'm curious about his future because I've made the case a bunch. Like, they could save a lot of money if they got out of that contract. Maybe he's a trade chip if they wanted to take a little money on. But they're not in a position necessarily to lose really good football players, especially on defense. And he's certainly one. He had a sack, 4 tackles in this game. You noticed him a lot. It's funny. He's one of these guys where I would imagine he feels like whether he's here or not, like, he's good enough that he's going to get paid a bunch by somebody next year. Think about John Allen. Washington cut him without any guaranteed money. He was available for a few hours and then signed a huge contract to go play in Minnesota. And I think Payne showed more this year and more impactful plays than even Allen did, the year before that as a pass rusher. So he doesn't have to worry about his future, whether it's here or somewhere else. But do you expect him to be in the fold here, even though he makes, I think it's like 27, 28 million against the cap next year?
Yeah, I think that'll be a really interesting storyline to follow, because I think when you look at his play, like, is he playing at that level? No, but is he damn close? Yes. And I think when you watch him on a down-to-down basis, like, his ability to stay square against the run, his ability to kind of be like, just, having watched him grow as a player over the years, like the intuitiveness, like understanding combinations, understanding how they're trying to attack him, how he's improved as a pass rusher, all that stuff is pretty fantastic. So, like you said, they need good football players. They need guys like Daron. So to me, like, maybe you're quote unquote, like, this is ever so slightly overpaying for his production next year just to keep him around, a guy that is playing hard, playing physically. Like, I think that's totally justified. Again, like, I'm not in the building. I don't know how they view him, but just watching the tape, I think there's a lot of reasons, if you're a fan of his, to be like, man, yeah, bring him back. Let's make this thing happen. Let's go for another year here. Because again, he's playing, like you said, he's playing really good football.
Yeah, 28 million, by the way, is the cap number for Daron Payne, which is about 9% of the salary cap this year in 2026. So that would be his number. Only Laramie Tunsil's even in the same zip code as him. Tunsil at 24.9 million. He's going to get an extension, so I would imagine that number is actually going to come down considerably for this first year. That's normally how the extension works, and he wouldn't cost 25 million against the cap. And then you have Sam Cosmi is the only other guy scheduled to make over 20 million against the cap. They can get out of the Marshawn Lattimore 18.5 million at some discount. And then Terry's right at 18 million. So it's pretty far and away that Payne is their highest paid player. And you're right. Like, if you're signing him in free agency right now, based on the tape of the last year or two, you're not giving him 28 million, but it's not like you're getting him for 15 million a year either.
Yeah.
You know, like this is a guy that's like a $20 million or more a year defensive tackle. So it's not crazy. And the other thing to remember is, I guess twofold. One, they need to be in the business of getting Pro Bowl caliber defensive players, not giving them up. But on top of that, like I look at him and I go, if you needed money, maybe you worry about the cap number. They have top 3 money in the league right now to play with, and they rarely ever spend it all. So like, it's not like, you know, you're about to go out to dinner and you're not sure if you're going to be able to pay for the tabs. You're like looking under cushions. You already know you have way more money than you need. You can probably get the appetizer if you want to.
No, I think that's a great way to put it. And again, like, you know, I think 20 to 25 million, maybe even like 26, 27 is kind of where he's at. So like, it's not like you're like crazy far off. When I say you're like slightly overpaid, I mean very slightly overpaid based on his production and quite frankly, based on the defensive tackle market at the moment. So yeah, I think to your point, there's a lot of money available. That now they do have to fill a lot of needs. I think, what is it, Grant? They only have like 34 guys under contract for next year or something like that. It's a very small number.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of other people and other pieces they need to bring in, and it's not like all that money is just free money. They need to make a roster here. But I do think he's a guy that if you're happy with him, if you're happy with how he is in the building, like, keep him around, you know, because again, like you said, there is money to be spent and you need good defensive players, especially in the spine of the defense, defensive tackle, linebacker, secondary safety players. And so why, if you feel like he's that guy, would you move on?
Last guy really quickly, Von Miller, 9 sacks. He had his 9th sack against the Eagles. It kind of feels whisper quiet to me. Yeah. Like I remember a handful of them for sure. And a lot of them were late in games or whatever. But, you know, there's such a thing, I guess, as like loud sacks or quiet sacks. That was about as quiet a 9-sack season as I can remember. But if you would have told me before the year, sight unseen, especially with their record, the lack of leads they played with makes it harder. His snap count, which was higher than you would have anticipated because of all the injuries at edge, but still not a guy that's out there playing, you know, 75% of the time or whatever on passing downs. And a little bit of rundowns, he's making up less than that. Like 9 sacks is not bad. I think he probably played at a level where if he wants to play in the league again next year, and I'm assuming he does, somebody would bring him in for the role Washington envisioned this year that didn't quite work out because they ended up having to play him more than they wanted to.
That's why I like doing the show with you, Grant, because like that's exactly how I feel. Like I think when we were doing our preview show before the year started, talking about defensive line and the signing, we're like, if he gets 7 sacks, that's a win. And here he is almost at double digits. And again, he played more than you wanted him to, but man, like good for him. You know, an older player in a role, and he's able to maximize that opportunity. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he does moving forward if he wants to continue playing. But a guy that came in and did the job at a high level, and it's disappointing. This season is disappointing for a multitude of reasons, but I do feel disappointed for players like Vaughn and Bobby because, again, like this, they're nearing the end and they're kind of chasing that, you know, one last go at the big dance. And so for him to kind of go through this year, which was not what anybody expected, still have a productive season is really a testament to him and his football character. So kudos to him. And again, hopefully he sticks around for another couple more, if even if it's not with Washington, again, just to get another bite at that apple, maybe get back to the Super Bowl. We're
going to get deeper into various players as we break down all the position groups one by one here in the next couple of weeks ahead. But I wanted to do a quick exercise real quick on the defensive side of the ball before we pivot to offense next on Take Command. If there was one guy who you would just like put a flag in the ground and be like, and I'm talking about the non-obvious like starters or whatever, but you'd be like, man, I really want to see this guy back again. Like, I'll give you an example. Mine's Jacob Martin. I love how he plays. I like what he provides, I think, as a depth edge and like a pass rusher and different packages. Like he could really help them again next year. And if you're better in front of him with Armstrong and, maybe you take an edge in the top 10 or whatever, like it fits better when he's got the right role in your bullpen and he's being used in situations where he could thrive against, righties or whatever. But that would be my guy. Is there someone where you look at it and you go, I think in the right situation, like this guy could be really helpful?
Yeah, I mean, Jacob Martin was the guy that I immediately thought of because he's been that guy, right? He's been incredibly productive. He's set good edges in the run game. He's been more productive as a pass rusher. I think the guy that we'll see what they do with him and we'll see kind of the direction they go in the draft. But Will Harris, to me, is an interesting guy because of and I probably wouldn't appreciate him if I wasn't on the sideline for games, but the way he communicates with everybody, the corners, the linebackers, the other safety that he's on the field with, I think he's one of those pieces that I think he's playing good enough football, but the leadership, the communication that he brings might be more beneficial long-term, especially if you get more consistency in the defense as a whole in terms of rules. Like you give that guy, kind of let him be the green dot of the secondary. I think that might not be a bad idea moving forward into 2026, just because, again, like, is he playing good football? Yes, but it's the leadership, the communication that he brings that I found to be the most impressive element of his game.
All right, when we come back on Take Command, I want to ask you about something Dan Quinn said about potentially calling plays again next year in his press conference, and then we'll get into the offense. He's Logan, I'm Grant. This is Take Command. Welcome back to Take Command with Logan Paulsen. I'm Grant Paulsen. So another of the end-of-year press conference moments that I found really interesting from Dan Quinn was when he was asked about potentially calling defensive plays again next year. The expectation, certainly the speculation, has been that they're going to go get a grown-up stud defensive coordinator. And there's some legit dudes who have become available, by the way. I mean, Jonathan Gannon was fired in Arizona, good D coordinator. Raheem Morris was fired in Atlanta, who you were with in Atlanta, and was the assistant head coach to Dan Quinn for years with the Falcons. They know each other very well. He's already available. There are other guys that may or may not come available that were former head coaches, longtime DCs. But I bring this up because when Dan Quinn was asked about it in his end-of-year presser, he was still open to the idea. He said he's keeping an open mind to possibly calling plays. It's not something he did in Atlanta or early on here because I don't think it's his preference. But he said, I'm going to do what the team needs. And the exit interviews essentially are going to inform him on if he thinks that's what he needs to do now. Where do you weigh in on that? Because while their defense got better and I thought he did a really good job, I said earlier in the year, like I wanted him more involved. His defenses have never been outside of the top 5, basically, when he was exclusively a coordinator. And when he's been a head coach, they've never really been better than like 14th. So the more involvement, the better. That said, he did not do a good enough job, in my opinion, with like clock management and timeouts. And that's not all on him, but they were one of the worst in the league at keeping timeouts in the final week of the season. I know it's a third-string quarterback. You've got none left with about 11 minutes to go in a close game. So, like, I think it is harder to do some of those things when you're also a coordinator. Where are you at on this?
Yeah, I mean, knowing Dan and knowing what he did in Atlanta for the year and a half that I was with him, like his superpower is the stuff that we've talked about on this show, like his ability to build relationship, build connection, build a culture. And I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but if you haven't been in a culture built by Dan Quinn, you haven't been in a culture, man. Like it's a different type of thing. And I think it's a testament. You can see the results of that culture with all the adversity this season underwent and his ability to kind of manage the ship. So now when you talk about defense, like I think Dan's a hell of a coach, right? He's on the details. He's a good communicator. He's a good teacher. He thinks he tries to improve in that area every single year. And so I just look at the difference between the defense as it was under the previous defensive coordinator and what it is now. And like, I don't have a lot of reason as to why, but it was drastically different and drastically more efficient in terms of getting guys in the right positions and getting them to play good football. So can he bring some of that? And I think about him with more talented pieces, the feel that he has for calling a game. Like I look back to some of the stuff he did in Dallas, like he just has a great feel for some of that stuff. So is he talented? Yes, absolutely. And it really comes down to what he wants to be. Does he want to, again, be the guy that's the culture builder, like kind of the guy at the front of the room, or does he want to be in the weeds a little bit more? Because like you mentioned a bunch of defensive coordinators, like Jeff Ulbrich is a guy that his name comes to mind in terms of DC. Like I think he's an absolute stud. He was a defensive coordinator in Atlanta. And he knows Dan from his time in Atlanta. Like I was on the staff with both of them.
And just so people know, he was the coordinator in Atlanta under Raheem, and he just likely lost his job with Morris fired. So he might be available too.
Yeah, and I think he's a smart, tough, like when you talk to him, he's got that like former linebacker mentality. And so like there's plenty of guys that he knows, that he feels comfortable with, that are like, and so it's not like that he knows, but they're also very, very talented guys. You mentioned Raheem. And so if he wants to get a guy in, I would love that. Let me ask you about
this guy really quick.
Yep.
A name that keeps popping up, and I've been dismissive of it because I'm like, why would this guy make the linear move? Brian Flores' contract is up. He's going to be interviewing for head coaching jobs. I get so steamed up for Brian Flores. Like, it's like McDonald's sausage, egg, and cheese biscuits, and then Brian Flores. Like, that's kind of my list.
That's your bet.
Yeah. I don't know why he would leave Minnesota to do that. Everyone keeps kind of thinking like, well, maybe he just goes somewhere, you get an assistant head coach title. I don't really see that. Would that make any sense to you at all? If he gets shut out from a head coaching standpoint rather than going back to Minnesota?
The fan in me wants that to happen so bad.
Yeah,
I think that defense is absolute nightmare fuel, man. Like right. when I was prepping that week, I was like, I don't know what to do. Because everything looks like zero. When you're prepping zero rules, it's tough. And then all of a sudden they're dropping in the Tampa 2 invert with a cross dog, and it's just like our protection rules are screwed. And so I want that to happen more than anything. Talk about elevating personnel. Like, I don't know if there's a DC that I've watched this year that elevates personnel better than what he did in Minnesota. So I would absolutely do a backflip if that happened. However, to your point, like, why would I do that? You know what I mean? Like, why? Right. Why would I go completely laterally? You're going to a building where there's a defensive-minded head coach, not an offensive-minded. You're going to a building where the talent is worse, where there's like more of a cleanup job to happen on aisle 5. It doesn't make sense. But like his name, just from fans, gets thrown at me a lot. So it's worth kind of saying, hey, this is a guy that might be available. But I also think there's a better chance he gets a head coaching job. I think so too. And so there's obviously like he has the, he's suing the NFL. And so like, is he going to get a head coaching job? But wherever he goes, like he's going to make so much money. Like the other one I heard around is like Dallas is going to just basically break the bank to bring him in there to like fix their defense, which I think is entirely reasonable. But that's the type of thing you're talking about, is a ton of money, a ton of titles. Like he will be the highest paid assistant coach in the NFL, I think, when this is all said and done. And we're talking a cycle with some really good offensive minds coming to the forefront here too. So like, that's how valuable he's going to be. And again, like, would he make this team significantly better? Yes, but he's not just looking at Washington. He's looking at head coaching positions. He's looking at, if he's going to move, right, people that have fired their defensive coordinators, for example, like there will be plenty of opportunities, and he can be very selective about where he wants to go. And like you said, at the moment, there is a lot of work that needs to be done on that side of the football. And like, does he want to be a part of that? Money talks, but again, like I think there's probably better opportunities for him.
All right, let's talk about the Commanders' offense to end the season against the Eagles. So Bill did get 13 carries against a really good stout defense, just 29 yards, 2.2 a pop, crashes back down to earth, long of 8. So early in the game, when I rewatched his carries, what I was looking for was what you talked about, which is like, maybe when it wasn't going as well, the one thing he could clean up or help himself with is, hey, just take the 3. Let's take the layups kind of thing and not try to do something else and go -1 or 0 or whatever. I thought early in the game, especially, he did that. He just kind of rammed it up in there, got what was there. If he backpedaled a little bit in traffic, pushed the pile. How did you feel like he did? There just wasn't a lot of running room, I didn't think.
Yeah, not a lot of running room. And there's certain times where like I see runs, and I've been coached, in the environment I've been coached in, I've been learned it in a very specific way. And so sometimes I'm like, why is the back not pressing it here and then cutting? Why are they not winding this back? But I don't know how they're coaching it. So there are times where I kind of want to nitpick and whatever. But I think overall, to your point, like there wasn't a lot of running room. There's not a ton of air. And to keep the offense on schedule, especially for that long, I think it was the first drive of the game that they had where it was very, very long, or the second drive. where a lot of that is obviously Josh Johnson scrambling, but just the running backs keeping them on schedule. I think the other thing too is like you really like styles make fights a little bit. And so while I think Bill Krosky-Merritt did a great job, I think this was a C-Rod game all the way. Whenever it gets a little bit murky or a little bit muddy, there's not a ton of space. Like that dude, his forward lean just maximizes that offensive line. So anytime you play Philly, like I'm probably putting C-Rod in there and letting him turn out 4 yards a pop, basically. Because again, that's the kind of runner that he is. And again, kind of tenderize that meat to put Bill in. So again, I do think stylistically, like I don't think this detracts from anything Bill's done this season. I just think when it's time to run the football downhill, it's got to be C-Rod versus teams that are fast sideline to sideline the way Philadelphia is.
It's hard for me to spend a lot of time kind of evaluating, analyzing, some of the other guys like Terry McLaurin, who had a good game, because they were playing against literal second and third string players. It was like a preseason game where you're out there as ones against backups. Yeah. But Terry certainly did some good things, drew some penalties, 4 for 57, finished strong. Let me ask you about this guy real quick. Deebo Samuel ends up with 2 catches for 20 yards. I think they both came first series, actually. A couple of screens to him to get him going. Where are you on your interest in bringing Deebo back going into the offseason?
So this is maybe the most compelling question to me. Like the Daron Payne, like I'm like in the emphatic, like yes, like bring him back. If you got to rework the contract, rework it. But I think you want that player back. Deebo, I'm a little bit more uncertain of. I think it really depends on what the market is. Like I think when you see him at his best, which is the Dallas game a couple weeks ago, there's no doubt you want that guy in the building. Like he's physical, he's tough, he's a hard tackle, he plays hard. He brings this explosive juice to the offense that's fantastic. So like get that guy here, right? But if he's going to want $25 million, like I'm not in on that. You know what I'm saying? If he's in the $12 to $15 million range, yeah, we can have a conversation about that because I think the way he plays, his age, the injury history, all that stuff kind of stacks against you and says like, it's not a great bet because of where he's at in his career. But when you just watch the best of him is 1,000% worth it, man. Like there are very few players that I still get like juiced up every time they touch the football. And he's one of them. Like I think about the reverse that he had versus Dallas, the dig that he caught versus Dallas, where he is running with like ill intent in his heart. And there's something so beautifully poetic about that. And it gets me so fired up. So like, I love it. But again, like there are other things here that are going to factor in, like age, injury history, the weight issue at the beginning of the offseason, usage, like all those things. And what is the dollar amount that you feel comfortable paying for that?
Yeah, I think you only get to allocate so many funds at each position. And so I would probably be looking for someone on the other side of Terry that could stretch the field with speed vertically and open some things up underneath for McLaurin, maybe as a better complementary piece, especially if you're going away from this Kingsbury operation and the screen game and the horizontal game and some of the stuff that they did that felt like it fit Deebo really well. So I asked you last segment for a stand on the table guy to bring back that you think in the right light, when you kind of squint, you could see it working out really well down the road on offense. My guy would be Treylon Burks. He showed enough. I'm intrigued. He's huge. He's physical at the catch point. Like, I don't know if he's ever going to max out to be a worthwhile first-round pick that the Titans took, but this is a guy that should be on an NFL roster. Do you have a guy on the offensive side that you would say that about? Like, hey, no matter what happens this offseason, I'd like to see him still get a seat at the table next year.
Yeah, so Treylon Burks is a great call out. I mean, he's definitely been the most kind of fun, flashy, dynamic of the new additions we've seen, especially at the skills position spot. The guy I'm going to call attention to is Chris Paul. Now, I don't know if Chris Paul needs to be the starting left guard next year, but I think he's played well enough to be at least the swing interior player. Like, I think that's something that I would really look at. Like, I thought at points this year, like I thought as the year went on, he kind of took a little bit of a dip in terms of production and consistency, which is something that often happens with guys that are starting for the first time. But I think the highs that he brings, especially with Laramie in the game, like Laramie, I don't know if it's Laramie's experience or his communication with Chris, but that really made Chris a significantly better football player. So if you get that version of Chris playing next to Laramie Tunsil, Like, I think it's an opportunity to kind of bring him in and compete with Brandon Coleman. Like, maybe you draft somebody in the later round. Like, let's get a 3-way competition there. Because I do think, like, as much as I like Allegretti, as much as I like Wiley, they're probably going to move in a different direction. But, like, yeah, bring Chris Paul back, let him compete, and bring another young piece in there to really add an element to that offensive line.
Yeah, and they're going to have to pay Laramie Tunsil, which Adam Peters said in the end-of-year presser, they look forward to doing effectively. I mean, he basically said they want to get something done, and they want to get it done sooner rather than later. All right, we're going to give you multiple episodes a week. We'll be breaking down each position group. We'll obviously have reaction pods, as significant news breaks as well. So make sure you're subscribed, rate, review. Keep us in your feed so that you know when you get a new episode dropping on Take Command. For our producer, Evan O'Brien, and for Logan, I'm Grant, saying so long. Thanks for checking us out.